I betrayed my own father in the cruelest way possible. Dad, it's just a piece of junk rusting in the garage, I said, selling his beloved 1969 Dodge Charger behind his back for my wife's dream vacation. I didn't trust the man who raised me choosing a woman who promised me the world over a father who'd given me everything. 3 weeks later, Dad showed me a folder that revealed the truth about my wife and taught me a lesson I'll never forget for the rest of my life. Before I tell you how my father saved our family from this nightmare, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to choose between someone you loved and someone who truly loved you. 3 weeks ago, Dad drove to Jacksonville for his monthly visit to see his dying Navy buddy. It was the perfect opportunity. Valentina and I had been planning our Swiss Alps vacation for over a year, but we were $25,000 short. "This is our chance, Christopher," Valentina whispered Thursday night. "Your father will never sell that old car, but we deserve this trip. The Alps are calling us." Friday morning, I watched Dad's pickup disappear down Magnolia Street. He waved from the window smiling. "Take care of the house, son. Don't let that Charger get lonely." By noon, I was on the phone with Riverside Auto Classics. "I've got a 1969 Dodge Charger RT, fully restored, museum quality." "Bring her in," the dealer said. "If she's clean, we can talk serious money." I backed the Charger out for the first time in months. The engine purred 20 years of Dad's careful work, evident in every smooth shift. For a moment, I almost changed my mind. Almost. But then I thought about Valentina's face when she'd seen those Swiss resort brochures, her eyes lighting up at the thought of skiing in Zermatt, staying in luxury chalets. This car was just metal and chrome. Our future together, that's what mattered. The dealer offered $75,000 on the spot. "Your father did beautiful work. This is a collector's dream." I signed the papers and took the check, trying not to think about all those Saturday mornings watching Dad's patient hands restore this machine. Trying not to remember Mom planning road trips they'd never take. Sunday evening I was making dinner when Dad's truck pulled in. Then his footsteps stopped. The silence stretched so long, I looked out the window. Dad stood in front of the open garage, staring at the empty space shoulders, shaking. My phone rang 30 seconds later. "Christopher!" His voice was hollow. "Where is she? Where's the car?" "Dad, I can explain." "Where is my car?" The roar made me flinch. I'd never heard him yell like that. "I sold it," I whispered. Silence. Then barely audible, "Get home, now." I found him at the kitchen table, still in traveling clothes, a manila folder spread out. His eyes were red, and he looked 10 years older. "Sit down, son." Dad let me explain. "Valentina and I just returned from Switzerland. We spent $50,000 on the vacation of a lifetime, still have $20,000 left. It was worth every penny to see her happy." "Oh." Dad pulled out a photograph. Valentina in a wedding dress standing next to a stranger. Then another photo, another wedding, another man. "Her real name is Linda Marsh," he said quietly. "She's done this before." I stared at the photos, my world tilting. "That's impossible. These could be anyone." "I've been investigating your wife for 18 months, Christopher. Ever since she started asking about this house, my health, our finances." His voice was steady, clinical. "She's a professional. You just funded her next disappearing act. You're wrong. You're upset about the car. She's going to leave you, son, like she left Stanley Wright in Phoenix after convincing him to sell his mother's house. Like she left George Murphy in Tampa after taking his father's auto shop." He spread out documents, marriage certificates, police reports, newspaper clippings. "Now she has 75,000 reasons to disappear." I shot up, knocking my chair backward. "This is insane. You're so bitter about Mom. So jealous I found love that you'd make up lies." "That car was your mother's favorite," Dad said softly. "She'd sit in it every Sunday after church, planning places we'd go when I finished restoring it. Now it's gone, and the woman who convinced you to sell it is going to destroy what's left of our family." I grabbed my jacket. "I don't have to listen to this paranoid nonsense. Valentina loves me. Maybe you should try being happy for your son instead of destroying the best thing in my life." "Christopher, please." "That car was just taking up space in the garage, Dad. It's not bringing Mom back. It's just metal and chrome from the past, and I'm not going to let it hold me back from my future." The words hit him like physical blows. His face went pale, and I immediately regretted saying it, but pride wouldn't let me take it back. "She's targeting me next," he said quietly. "The house, my savings. That's how it works." I walked to the door. "Valentina loves me, and I love her. Deal with it." I walked away that night thinking Dad had lost his mind. I had no idea what I was about to discover. Since returning from Switzerland, something about Valentina felt different. The change was subtle at first, like a shift in the wind that you can't quite place. We'd been back from our Alpine paradise for a month now, and the glow of those perfect 2 weeks was starting to fade. But instead of settling back into our normal routine, Valentina seemed more focused, more purposeful in ways that made my stomach twist with unease. It started with the questions about Dad. "Has your father been forgetting things lately?" she asked one Tuesday morning, stirring her coffee with deliberate precision. We were sitting on our back porch watching the Spanish moss sway in the Savannah humidity. Yesterday, when I mentioned the grocery store on Bull Street, he looked confused, like he didn't know what I was talking about. I looked up from my newspaper. "Dad's sharp as a tack Val. He's been shopping at Kroger on Bull Street for 15 years. "I know, baby. That's what worries me." She reached over and squeezed my hand. My grandmother started the same way. Little moments of confusion that we all dismissed. By the time we realized what was happening, the seed of concern she planted grew over the following days. Suddenly, I found myself watching Dad more carefully during our brief interactions. Was he moving slower? Did he repeat himself more often? When he forgot where he'd put his reading glasses, something he'd done 1,000 times before, Valentina's worried glance felt loaded with meaning. This old house must cost a fortune to maintain. She mentioned casually one evening, running her finger along the windowsill in our bedroom. The heating bills alone must be crushing him. And look at this peeling paint the way the floorboards creak. How does he manage it all on his fixed income? Her observations weren't wrong. Dad's house, the house I'd grown up in, was showing its age. The Victorian architecture that made Magnolia Street so charming also made it expensive to maintain. But hearing Valentina catalog its flaws felt wrong somehow, like she was appraising it rather than simply noticing. "He manages just fine," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if that was true. When was the last time I'd really looked at the house's condition? When had I last asked Dad about his finances? The credit card statements arrived on a Thursday. I was sorting through our mail when I found envelopes addressed to me from companies I'd never heard of. Platinum Rewards, MasterCard, Elite Travel Visa, Executive Business American Express. My hands trembled as I opened them, revealing balances that made my vision blur. $15,000 in charges I'd never made. Valentina. I called out, my voice sharper than intended. She emerged from the bathroom towel wrapped around her hair, looking like an innocent angel. "What's wrong, honey?" I held up the statements. "What are these? When did I apply for these credit cards?" Her expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Oh, those. I meant to tell you about them." She moved closer, her hand finding my arm. "Remember those business contacts we made in Switzerland? The investment opportunities I mentioned? You applied for credit cards in my name without telling me." "Christopher, baby, calm down." Her voice took on that soothing tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "These are business investments, import opportunities with Swiss luxury goods companies, the kind of connections that could set us up for life. You wouldn't understand all the financial details. It's complicated international stuff. $15,000, Valentina. That's not pocket change." She sighed like I was being deliberately difficult. "It's an investment in our future. The returns will be incredible once the deals go through. Trust me. Trust me." The same words she'd used when convincing me to sell Dad's car. The same tone, the same dismissive certainty that I couldn't possibly understand the bigger picture. That night, lying in bed beside her, Dad's words echoed in my mind like a broken record. His investigation folder, those photographs, the marriage certificates with names that weren't Valentina Cross. I started small, testing the waters with casual questions. "Tell me again about your childhood in Atlanta," I said over breakfast the next morning. "What about it?" She didn't look up from her phone. I love hearing about where you grew up. Your old neighborhood, your elementary school." She glanced up then, and for just a moment, I saw something I'd never noticed before. A hesitation. A calculation. "Yes, Buckhead Elementary," she said finally. "On Peachtree Road. But 3 months ago, before our trip, she'd told me she'd attended St. Mary's Catholic School in Virginia Highland. I remember because I'd mentioned having a cousin who lived in that neighborhood." "Right," I said carefully. "Peachtree Road." Over the next few days, I kept probing. Gentle questions about her college years, her first job, her family. Each answer contradicted something she'd told me before, small inconsistencies that might have been innocent mistakes if not for the pattern emerging. Her childhood home had moved from a Victorian cottage to a modern subdivision. Her college major had shifted from marketing to psychology. Her mother's maiden name changed from Patterson to Morrison. Each lie felt like a small betrayal, but it was the accumulation that made my chest tight with dread. Her answers about her childhood were completely different from what she'd told me before our trip. I found Dad's investigation file and called the phone numbers inside. The folder was exactly where I remembered seeing it 3 weeks ago, tucked inside the old secretary desk in Dad's kitchen, underneath a stack of unpaid bills and grocery store coupons. My hands shook as I opened it, spreading the contents across my own kitchen table, while Valentina was out getting her nails done. The photographs hit me first. Valentina in wedding dresses I'd never seen, standing beside men I'd never met. But it was the documents underneath that made my blood run cold. Marriage certificates, police reports, newspaper clippings with headlines like "Local man reports life savings stolen by daughter-in-law," and "Family business sold in suspected fraud case." At the bottom of the pile, written in Dad's careful handwriting, were 2 phone numbers with names beside them: Stanley Wright, Phoenix, Arizona; George Murphy, Tampa, Florida. I dialed Stanley first. "Hello?" The voice that answered sounded tired, defeated. "Mr. Wright, my name is Christopher Wade. I think you were married to my wife." The silence stretched so long, I thought he'd hung up. Then, "What's her name?" "Valentina Cross. But according to these documents, her real name might be Linda Marsh." "Jesus Christ!" His voice cracked. I wondered when this call would come. Stanley Wright was 62 years old, a retired insurance adjuster from Phoenix. He told his story in a flat, emotionless tone, like he'd rehearsed it for years. He'd met Valentina, Linda, at a community center in 2019, 2 years after his wife died. She was volunteering, helping organize events for seniors. Charming, attentive, genuinely interested in his life. "She started small," Stanley said. "Little comments about my mother. She seems tired lately. Have you noticed her forgetting things?" My mom was 84, living alone in the house she'd owned for 40 years. Valentina convinced me she wasn't safe. The pattern was sickeningly familiar. Valentina had slowly built a case that Stanley's mother needed memory care, the best facility in Arizona, $20,000 a month. The only way to afford it was to sell the house. $280,000 gone into a joint account with Valentina. 2 weeks later, she disappeared with every penny. My mother died 6 months later in that facility. Stanley's voice broke. She kept asking when she could go home. I kept telling her soon, but there was no home anymore. My throat felt raw. "Mr. Wright, I'm so sorry." "Stop her," he said simply. "Whatever she's planning with your family, don't let her do to you what she did to mine." The call with George Murphy was shorter, but equally devastating. His father had owned a small auto repair shop in Tampa for 38 years. After the old man died in 2021, George inherited it, but didn't want to run it. Too many memories. Valentina, who'd married him 8 months after his father's funeral, suggested selling. She made it sound so reasonable, George said. "Take the money, travel, heal together. Start fresh somewhere new." The shop sold for $195,000. 3 days after the check cleared, she was gone, vanished completely. "Did she ask about your father before he died?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Constantly. His health, his finances, whether he'd updated his will. I thought she was just being caring. George's laugh was bitter. "She researches everything first, Christopher. Knows your weaknesses before she even introduces herself." After I hung up, I sat staring at the evidence spread across my table. The pattern was crystal clear now. Valentina's recent questions about Dad's health, her comments about the house being expensive to maintain, her sudden interest in his daily routine. It was all preparation. She was setting up Dad exactly like she'd set up Stanley's mother and George's father. I called Dad immediately. "Son," he answered on the first ring, hope evident in his voice. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. You were right about everything." The silence that followed felt like forgiveness. "Where are you?" he asked quietly. "Home, but I can come over or meet me in the workshop. We have work to do." 20 minutes later, I found Dad in his garage workshop, the same space where he'd spent countless hours restoring Mom's charger. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, and the smell of motor oil and old wood brought back memories of childhood afternoons spent watching him work. "I should have listened to you. I said, the words tumbling out. I should have trusted you instead of Christopher. Dad's voice was firm but gentle. You're here now. That's what matters. I showed him the phone calls I'd made, told him about the credit cards, the inconsistencies in Valentina's stories. Dad nodded grimly, unsurprised by any of it. She's moving faster than I expected, he said. The questions about my health, the comments about the house, she's already in phase 2. What's phase 3? Convincing you I need to be in a care facility, then selling the house to pay for it. Dad's jaw tightened. Just like Stanley's mother. We stood there in the workshop, surrounded by the tools of Dad's trade, the honest work of his hands. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Dad put his hand on my shoulder. Son, now we're going to stop her together. Leonardo Davis helped us plan how to get Valentina's confession. The private investigator's office sat above a bail bondsman on Montgomery Street, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing. Davis himself was exactly what I'd expected, mid-50s, graying at the temples with the patient eyes of someone who'd seen every kind of human deception. Your father's been thorough, he said, spreading files across his desk. 18 months of documentation, financial records, witness statements. But we need her confession to make the charges stick. Dad sat beside me, more focused than I'd seen him in years. What do you need Christopher to do? Wear a wire, get her talking about her plans for Gregory. Davis pulled out a small recording device. Georgia's a one-party consent state, so this is completely legal. But, Christopher, you need to understand. Once she realizes what's happening, she'll run. My palms were sweating. What if she gets suspicious? She won't expect it, Dad said quietly. You're the mark. Remember? In her mind, you're still the naive husband who sold his father's car for a vacation. Davis nodded. That's your advantage. She thinks she's in control. An hour later, I was wired and ready. The recording device was smaller than a matchbook taped to my chest under my shirt. Davis and Dad would be monitoring from Dad's workshop, ready to call the police the moment we had enough evidence. I found Valentina in our bedroom, packing clothes into a suitcase. Going somewhere? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She looked up, smiled that radiant smile that had first captured me 3 years ago. Just organizing, baby, spring cleaning. Val, we need to talk about Dad. Her expression shifted slightly. What about Gregory? I sat on the bed, pulled out the photographs Dad had shown me weeks ago. I know who you really are. For a moment, her mask slipped completely. I saw calculation then, something cold and predatory I'd never noticed before. Then the smile returned, but it looked different now. Practiced artificial. Christopher, honey, what are these? Marriage certificates. Linda Marsh married Stanley Wright. Linda Marsh married George Murphy. I spread them across the bedspread. Your real name isn't Valentina Cross. She laughed, but it sounded forced. This is ridiculous. These could be anyone with the same name. Someone's obviously trying to frame me. I called them Val, Stanley, and George. They told me everything. The laughter died. She sat down slowly, her hand finding mine. Baby, listen to me. I don't know what those men told you, but they told me about the pattern, how you target families with elderly parents, how you convince the children their parents need care they can't afford. I pulled my hand away. Is that what you're doing with Dad? Your father is declining Christopher. You've seen it yourself. The forgetfulness, the confusion about simple things. I'm worried about him. He's not declining. You've been planting those ideas in my head. Valentina's voice took on that soothing tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. Sweetheart, you're upset about the car. I understand. But your father needs help, and this house is too much for him. The maintenance costs alone. Are you planning to convince me he needs memory care? She stood up abruptly, moved to the window. I think you should talk to someone, a therapist maybe. These conspiracy theories aren't healthy. What's the plan? Valentina convinced me Dad's losing his mind, then what, sell the house to pay for some expensive facility. Stop calling me that. Her voice was sharp now, the mask slipping again. And stop listening to your paranoid father's delusions. I pulled out my phone, played the recording of Stanley Wright describing his mother's fate. Valentina's face went white. He's lying, she whispered. Then I played George Murphy's account of his father's auto shop. Valentina sank into the chair by our dresser, her composure finally cracking. You don't understand, she said, and for the first time her voice sounded desperate. This family has money, real money. Your father's sitting on a gold mine with that house, his savings, his pension. You're both too stupid to see what you have. So you decided to take it. I deserve it. The words exploded out of her. 3 years I've invested in this family. 3 years of playing the perfect wife to a man who can't see past his dead mother's memory. Your father would be in a nice facility well cared for, and you'd have enough money to live the life you deserve. My heart was pounding. You're talking about stealing everything he has. It's not stealing if it's legal, power of attorney, medical necessity, family decisions. She was pacing now, animated. Your father will be in memory care within 6 months, and I'll have access to everything. The house alone is worth $400,000. You recorded this. Her face went white as she stared at my chest, finally noticing the slight bulge under my shirt. You actually recorded our private conversation? I stood up slowly. It's over, Valentina, or Linda, whoever you really are. She stared at me for a long moment, then moved with startling speed. She grabbed the emergency cash from our dresser drawer, the remaining $20,000 from the car sale, and pulled a passport from her jewelry box. Not her regular passport. This one had her photo, but a different name. You have no idea what you've done, she hissed. No idea who you're dealing with. She grabbed our remaining Swiss Alps money and headed for the door. The police intercepted Valentina at Savannah Airport. Leonardo Davis had called it in the moment our recording ended. By the time Valentina's taxi reached the departures terminal, 2 plainclothes detectives were already positioned at the international check-in counters waiting. I watched it all unfold from the observation deck with Dad and Davis. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, we could see her moving through the terminal, with practiced confidence pulling a small suitcase designer purse slung over her shoulder. She looked like any other business traveler heading out for a routine trip. There, Davis pointed. She's heading for the Swiss air counter. Of course she was going back to Switzerland, the country with numbered bank accounts and no extradition treaties with half the world. The arrest was swift and professional. Detective Martinez approached from her left, while his partner flanked her right. I couldn't hear the conversation from our vantage point, but I saw the exact moment Valentina realized she was caught. Her shoulders went rigid and she glanced around like a trapped animal looking for an escape route. "Ma'am, we need you to step aside," Detective Martinez said, when we met them at the security checkpoint later. "We have a warrant for your arrest." Valentina's transformation was complete. Gone was any trace of the loving wife or even the cold manipulator from our bedroom confrontation. This woman was pure venom. "This is harassment," she spat even as the handcuffs clicked into place. "I haven't done anything wrong." "That's Linda Marsh. You're under arrest for identity theft, wire fraud, and theft by deception." Martinez read from his warrant. "You have the right to remain silent." They found $20,000 in cash in her purse, our Swiss Alps money, the last remnant of Dad's car sale. But it was the contents of her suitcase that made my blood run cold. Multiple passports, each with her photo, but different names, credit cards I'd never seen, and a leather portfolio containing what looked like research files on 3 other families, complete with photographs, financial records, and handwritten notes about asset potential. 5 previous victims, Detective Martinez told us later at the station. Not just Stanley Wright and George Murphy, we found evidence of at least 3 more going back 8 years. "How many families did she destroy?" Dad asked quietly. "We're still counting." The legal machinery ground into motion. Arraignment bail hearing, federal charges since she'd crossed state lines. But I had a different mission. While Valentina sat in a holding cell, I was driving across Georgia, visiting every classic car dealer within a 200-mile radius of Savannah. The search took 2 weeks. I hit every lot from Augusta to Jacksonville, showing photos of Dad's 1969 Charger, describing its unique restoration details. Most dealers were helpful, but had nothing. A few recognized the car from shows or auctions, but hadn't seen it. I was starting to lose hope when I pulled into Turner Classic Autos on a rainy Thursday afternoon. The lot was impressive, rows of pristine vintage cars gleaming under protective covers. A bell chimed as I entered the showroom, and a man in his 60s emerged from the back office. "Help you find something?" he asked, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "I'm looking for a specific car, a 1969 Dodge Charger RT Burgundy with black racing stripes. My father restored it over 20 years. The man's expression changed instantly. "You're Gregory Wade's boy." I stared at him. "You know my father?" "Know him, son. Your father saved my life 25 years ago. He extended his hand. "Maxwell Turner. Your dad co-signed my first business loan when no bank in Georgia would touch me. This place exists because of Gregory Wade." My throat felt tight. "You have his car?" Maxwell nodded toward the back of the showroom. Been waiting for this day since I bought her from Riverside Auto. Knew she'd find her way home eventually. He led me through the showroom to a covered area in the back. With ceremony, he pulled away a custom car cover to reveal Dad's Charger in all her restored glory. The burgundy paint gleamed under the fluorescent lights, every chrome detail perfect. "She's exactly as your father left her," Maxwell said softly. "I've been maintaining her, keeping her ready, never intended to sell her." I ran my hand along the hood, feeling 20 years of Dad's patient work in every smooth curve. "What do I owe you?" Maxwell looked at me like I'd suggested something obscene. "Son, your father never asked for a dime back on that loan. Never once mentioned the risk he took on a stranger's dream. This car belongs with the Wade family, and that's where she's going. Maxwell, I can't just—" "You're not taking anything?" he said firmly. "I'm giving back what was always yours." Maxwell refused any payment. "This car belongs with the Wade family." 6 months later, we sat in federal court as Valentina received her sentence. The courthouse in downtown Savannah felt like a cathedral of justice, all marble columns and soaring ceilings that made every whisper echo. Dad sat beside me in the gallery, his weathered hands folded in his lap, wearing the same navy suit he'd worn to Mom's funeral 3 years ago. It had been a long 6 months. Federal cases moved slowly, deliberately, like the massive wheels of a machine designed to crush lies under the weight of evidence. Leonardo Davis had been right. Once the FBI got involved, Valentina's entire network of false identities began unraveling. "The defendant will rise," Judge Harrison said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen every kind of human deception. Valentina stood at the defense table, flanked by 2 public defenders who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She'd aged in federal custody. Her hair had lost its salon shine, and the designer clothes had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit that made her look smaller somehow, less dangerous. But when she turned to scan the courtroom, her eyes found mine with the same cold calculation I remembered from our bedroom confrontation. Even now, even here, she was still working angles. "Mr. Wade," the prosecutor called, "please approach the witness stand." I'd rehearsed my testimony dozens of times, but walking across that courtroom felt like crossing a minefield. The oath, the questions, the careful recounting of how a professional manipulator had convinced me to betray my own father. "Can you describe the financial impact of the defendant's actions on your family?" "She convinced me to sell my father's 1969 Dodge Charger for $75,000. I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We spent $50,000 of that on a luxury vacation to Switzerland, money that came from selling my father's most treasured possession. She used the remaining $25,000 to fund credit card applications in my name, running up an additional $15,000 in debt." "And what was the car actually worth?" "Between $150,000 and $180,000. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Even the judge looked surprised. "So, the defendant convinced you to sell a car worth potentially $180,000 for $75,000, then spent most of the proceeds on a vacation that served her interests." "Yes, ma'am." The hardest part was describing the manipulation itself, how she'd planted seeds of doubt about Dad's mental state, how she'd made me question my own father's competence while positioning herself as the caring daughter-in-law, just looking out for the family's best interests. Stanley Wright testified via video link from Phoenix, his voice breaking as he described watching his mother's die in a memory care facility she never needed. George Murphy called in from Tampa, his anger still raw as he talked about losing his father's life's work to a woman who'd pretended to love him. The defendant targeted families in crisis, the prosecutor said in her closing argument. She preyed on grief, on love, on the natural desire of children to care for aging parents. She turned those noble impulses into weapons against the very people she claimed to protect. When Judge Harrison read the sentence, her voice was firm and final. 12 years in federal prison with restitution ordered for all victims. Valentina's shoulders sagged. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely defeated. "The defendant has shown no remorse," the judge continued. "Her actions destroyed families, stole life savings, and exploited the most vulnerable relationships in our society. This sentence reflects not just punishment, but protection for future potential victims." As the bailiff led Valentina away in shackles, she turned one last time to look at me. No calculation this time, just pure hatred. Dad squeezed my shoulder as we watched her disappear through the side door. Walking out of that courthouse that day, I knew it was time to make things right. I sold my apartment and moved back home to take care of Dad. The decision came to me 3 days after the sentencing, as I sat in my downtown loft, surrounded by the trappings of my old life. Expensive furniture that Valentina had picked out, artwork that meant nothing to me, a kitchen I barely used, because we'd always eaten out at restaurants I couldn't really afford. Everything felt hollow, like props in a play I no longer wanted to perform. My realtor thought I was crazy. "The market's hot right now, Christopher, but are you sure this place has doubled in value since you bought it?" "I'm sure," I said, signing the listing papers. "I need to be somewhere that matters." Dad didn't ask questions when I showed up with a U-Haul full of boxes and the few possessions that actually meant something to me. He just opened the front door wider and said, "Welcome home, son." Moving back into my childhood bedroom felt strange at first. Sleeping under the same slanted ceiling where I dreamed of escaping Savannah, surrounded by faded posters of cars and baseball players from 20 years ago. But within a week, it felt right in a way my expensive loft never had. We developed routines without discussing them. Dad made coffee every morning at 6:30, the same ritual he'd followed since Mom died. I'd join him at the kitchen table with the newspaper, and we'd share the comfortable silence of two men who'd been through hell together and come out the other side. "You don't have to stay, you know," he said one morning about a month after I'd moved in. "I'm not some invalid who needs constant supervision." I looked up from the sports section. "I know, I want to be here. Even when I start forgetting where I put my glasses, when my hearing gets worse and I make you repeat everything twice. And especially then." Dad nodded, satisfied. We never talked about it again. The real bonding happened in the garage. Saturday mornings, I'd find Dad bent over the Charger's engine, reading glasses perched on his nose, consulting repair manuals older than I was. The car had come through its ordeal remarkably well. Maxwell Turner had been meticulous in his care, but Dad always found something to tinker with. "Hand me that socket wrench," he'd say, and I'd dig through his perfectly organized toolbox, each tool outlined in black marker on the pegboard behind his workbench. At first, I was just his assistant holding flashlights and fetching parts, but gradually Dad started explaining what he was doing and why. How to read the engine's rhythms, how to diagnose problems by sound and feel, how 20 years of patient work had transformed a rust bucket into a thing of beauty. "Your mother used to sit right there," he said one Sunday morning, pointing to an old folding chair in the corner. "She'd bring her coffee and the crossword puzzle keep me company while I worked. Sometimes she'd hand me tools, but mostly she just liked being here." I could picture it, Mom in her Sunday dress humming along to Dad's old radio, occasionally looking up from her puzzle to watch him work with those patient, careful hands. She'd have liked seeing us work together. Dad continued adjusting the carburetor with surgical precision. "Always said this car would bring the family together someday. Even after I sold it, especially after you sold it. Sometimes we have to lose something to understand what it really means." I learned more than car repair in that garage. I learned about the satisfaction of work done with your hands, about the patience required to restore something beautiful, about the difference between price and value. The Charger wasn't worth $180,000 because of its market value. It was priceless because of the love Dad had poured into every bolt and gasket. "Why didn't you ever remarry?" I asked one afternoon as we changed the oil. Dad was quiet for so long, I thought he hadn't heard me. Then, "I had my great love. Some men get that, some don't. I wasn't going to settle for anything less than what your mother and I had." I thought about Valentina, about the passion I'd mistaken for love, the excitement I'd confused with partnership. What Dad and Mom had was different, deeper, quieter, built on respect and shared dreams rather than grand gestures and expensive trips. "I'm sorry I didn't see it," I said. "You see it now. That's what matters." Every Sunday morning, we work on Mom's car together, and I finally understand what family means. 1 year later, I understand what that car really represents. It's a crisp October morning in Savannah, and Dad and I are in the garage working on the Charger's suspension. The Spanish moss outside rustles in the autumn breeze, and the smell of motor oil mingles with the scent of Dad's coffee cooling on his workbench. This has become our sanctuary, not just a place to work on an old car, but where a son learned what it means to be a man. In "Hand Me That Torque Wrench," Dad says, his voice steady and sure. At 72, his hands are still steady, his mind still sharp. All those fears Valentina had planted about his declining health seem absurd now. She'd tried to convince me he was failing when he was actually at his strongest, strong enough to investigate her for 18 months, strong enough to forgive his son's betrayal, strong enough to fight for his family when it mattered most. I think about that $50,000 Swiss trip often. 2 weeks of luxury that felt like a lifetime when I was living it. The five-star hotels, the private ski instructors, the champagne dinners overlooking snow-capped mountains. Valentina had been in her element, playing the part of the sophisticated wife who deserved the world's finest things. But what did I actually remember from those 2 weeks? Mostly I remembered feeling anxious about the money we were spending, worried about the credit card bills that would come later, guilty about the empty space in Dad's garage. Even in paradise surrounded by everything money could buy, I'd felt hollow. Compare that to this morning, working beside my father in a garage that smells like 30 years of honest labor, learning skills that connect me to generations of men who built things with their hands. This costs nothing and means everything. You know what I realized? I tell Dad as we work. That trip was never about us. It was about her. The whole thing was performance. Showing off to strangers, posting photos to make other people jealous, proving she could get a man to spend his father's legacy on her fantasies. Dad nods, not looking up from his work. Real love doesn't demand proof, son. It doesn't need grand gestures or expensive trips. Real love shows up every day in small ways without being asked. That's the difference I never understood before. Valentina's love came with conditions and price tags. It demanded constant validation through material things. Dad's love, and Mom's before she died, was different. It was steady, unconditional, given freely without expectation of return. I should have seen the signs. I continue tightening a bolt with the precision Dad taught me. The way she always needed more expensive restaurants, more luxury vacations, more proof that I loved her enough to spend money I didn't have. Manipulation is a skill, Christopher. She was a professional. Don't blame yourself for being human. But I do blame myself in healthy ways now. I blame myself for not trusting the man who raised me, who never once in 38 years had steered me wrong. I blame myself for choosing flash over substance excitement, over stability, a woman who demanded everything over a father who asked for nothing. The charger purrs to life when Dad turns the key, 20 years of restoration work evident in every smooth revolution. This car isn't just metal and chrome. It's a testament to patience to love, expressed through action rather than words, to the kind of commitment that builds something beautiful over time. Hey, she's running better than ever, Dad says, satisfaction evident in his voice. And just like us, I reply. We stand there in the garage, two men who've been through hell and found their way back to each other. The car between us isn't just transportation. It's proof that some things are worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth the long work of restoration. Have you ever been blinded by someone who seemed to love you? Someone who convinced you to betray the people who actually had your back? How did your family help you see the truth? I learned that real love doesn't come with price tags or demand proof through grand gestures. It shows up quietly, consistently, especially when you don't deserve it. Looking back on this journey, I want to share the most important lessons I learned from nearly losing everything that mattered. First, betrayal stories like mine teach us that manipulation often comes disguised as love. When someone constantly demands expensive proof of your affection, that's not love, that's exploitation. Real family bonds don't require Swiss Alps vacations or luxury spending to validate them. Second, family drama stories often reveal who truly has your back when crisis hits. My father spent 18 months quietly investigating the woman who was destroying our family, never once saying, "I told you so," when the truth came out. That's the kind of protection only real family provides. Third, God has a way of using our worst mistakes to teach us our greatest lessons. When I sold that charger, I thought I was choosing my future over the past. But God showed me that honoring your parents and protecting family legacy isn't about living in the past. It's about building a foundation for the future. These betrayal stories and family drama stories happen more often than we'd like to admit. Professional scammers like Valentina target families every day, turning children against parents, love against loyalty, dreams against wisdom. But God gives us discernment if we're willing to listen to the people who've loved us longest. The most painful betrayal stories often become the most powerful redemption stories. My father's forgiveness taught me that God's love works the same way. Patient, unconditional, always ready to welcome us home when we've made terrible mistakes. Today, family drama stories like ours remind me that material things can be replaced, but relationships built on genuine love and respect are priceless. That charger isn't valuable because of its market price. It's valuable because it represents the patient love of a father who never gave up on his son. God used my betrayal to show me what real love looks like. Sometimes we have to lose everything to find what truly matters. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family loyalty and forgiveness. Have you ever had to choose between someone who demanded everything and someone who asked for nothing? Drop a comment below sharing your story. Your experience might help someone else facing a similar choice. And please subscribe to our channel for more real-life family drama stories that remind us what truly matters in life.